You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 42nd edition of the Useless Information Retrocast. Among the stories you'll hear today includes one about two sisters who couldn't agree on how to repair their fire-damaged house. So what did one of the sisters decide to do? She had the building cut in half and she moved her portion away. Plus, you'll learn about a mix-up in which two mothers were sent home from the hospital with the wrong babies. It is rare, but it does happen. And then you'll learn about a baker in Indiana who spent a lot of time preparing for his eventual demise. He opted to outfit his mausoleum crypt with the finest comforts of home, just in case he came back to life. Well, all those stories, today's retro sponsor, the question of the day, and so much more, they're all coming up next on today's Retrocast. I am Steve Silverman, and this is the Useless Information Podcast.
Useless information.
Hey everyone, I hope all is well with you. I have to say I'm a bit behind in posting this episode, and that's mainly because I went down our basement the other day and I noticed that our septic line had backed up. Now, it really wasn't too bad. I caught it just in time. It was just starting to come up through our laundry sink down there, and the septic guys, they came out very promptly and they cleared out the line. But that's why all the stories you're about to hear, every single one of them, they involve sewage in one way or another. No, I'm just kidding. All the stories I selected, they have nothing to do with sewage. They're much cleaner than that, and I do hope you enjoy listening to them. So let's dive right in. In February of 1933, a fire damaged a house at 1527 4th Street Northeast in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The property was owned by two sisters. That's 50-year-old widow Mrs. Frances Rosansky and Mrs. Frances Vacharik. Now, only Mrs. Rosansky lived there. Mrs. Vacharik, on the other hand, she rented out her half of the building to a couple and their 6 children. The problem was that after the fire, a large hole remained in the section that was occupied by Mrs. Rosansky, but the half that was rented out by her sister, that was mostly untouched, and the two of them, they could not agree on how to handle the damage. Mrs. Rosansky, she wanted the house demolished and totally rebuilt, but her sister, on the other hand, strongly opposed that plan. As a result, Mrs. Rosansky's half of the house remained exposed to the weather. As the seasons change, she gets snow, sleet, rain, then mosquitoes, flies, and so on. That just made life living there unbearable. As this dragged on and they couldn't come to an agreement, Mrs. Rosansky decided to take matters into her own hands, and she hired a carpenter to address the damage.
I own half the house, so I will just have him saw off my half, move it over a bit, and build anew.
And that's exactly what happened. The carpenter carefully separated the two halves, and he began building a colonial-style bungalow about 3 feet or 1 meter from the original location of her half of the house. A little side note is that the Star Tribune article that this originally sourced to, it doesn't make clear whether the bungalow was entirely new construction or if it was a renovation of that old structure. Anyway, in the meantime, Mrs. Rosansky lived in 2 sheds at the back of the property while her new home was being completed. As for the remaining half of that original building, it stood with its rear wall fully exposed to the elements. That means you could see its beams, the plaster, the lath, and even an open doorway that had once connected that half to Mrs. Rosansky's moved portion. Now, Mrs. Rosansky said she felt sorry for the tenants, but hoped that the city would condemn the remaining structure and order it demolished. In a comment clearly aimed at her sister, she said,
It will be a good lesson to somebody. The whole place should have been torn down.
While the story was syndicated nationwide, there never really was a follow-up, so I don't know if that building was eventually torn down. I did take a look at Google Maps, but it really wasn't of much help. Since 1933, so much has changed, so I don't know if one of those buildings was taken down, both of the buildings were taken down, or they're both still standing. One could say that Robert Ogden Wright was a planner. He was born on October 15, 1883 in Paris. That's not Paris, France, but Paris, Kentucky. And he would spend the last 40 years of his life in Shelbyville, Indiana. And it was there that he started his own baking business, and his Bob's cookies, well, they were a favorite of all the locals. And while certainly not the death sentence that it was prior to the invention of injectable insulin, diabetes treatment in the late 1930s, early 1940s was still in its infancy, and unfortunately Bob suffered as a result. As I said, though, Bob was a planner, and he wished to make sure that his death went as smoothly as possible and that every last detail had been taken care of. After an article appeared in the August 3, 1940 edition of the Indianapolis Star, Bob's unusual end-of-life preparations made him a bit of a minor hometown celebrity. That's because the story spread across the nation, appearing in newspapers, magazines, and he even made a trip to New York City to appear on the radio. And what Bob had done was he prepared his crypt at the Temple Hill Mausoleum with all the trappings of home. It's not that Bob believed he'd come back to life after his death, but one needs to be prepared, just in case it happened. His crypt measured roughly 2.5 feet or 76 centimeters wide by 2 feet or 61 centimeters high by 8 feet or 244 centimeters deep, and according to the Indianapolis Star, quote, its walls are painted a brilliant Chinese red, Wright's favorite color. A bright rug has been placed on the floor. The crypt contains a mattress cot 6 inches high, that's around 15.2 centimeters. The cot is covered with a red and white tapestry spread and has a pillow at the head. Along one wall beside the bed is a small rack holding a red and white towel, a mirror, a glass shelf upon which rests a vase of artificial flowers, a corncob pipe and tobacco, and 2 brandy glasses. It continues. There's a small radio in the crypt, a clock, and numerous other articles, including a cake of soap, cigarettes, cigars, matches, and a comb. There are candles near the foot of the crypt, unquote. Now, this is just an observation on my part. The one thing missing in this whole thing, if he came back to life, how is he going to get out? After his passing on February 26 of 1942 at 58 years of age, his obituary in the Indianapolis News stated that he was survived by his widow and 2 daughters, all unnamed, and by his son, Bruce Wright, who was in the United States Coast Guard in Brooklyn and had been a star player on the Shelbyville High School basketball team. Clearly, that was a different time when the author of the obituary didn't feel the need to mention the names of any of the women, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill them in for you. His wife was the former Goldie Pearl Wilson, and his 2 daughters were Virginia Odin Wright and Mary Jane Wright. September 27th of 1954 was a great day for 22-year-old Vera Bowers and 24-year-old Sheila Reed. That's because both had been admitted to East London's Forest Gate Hospital and gave birth to healthy baby boys. Both babies had a lot in common. They both weighed 7.5 pounds or 3.4 kilograms at birth. They had brown hair and blue eyes. Vera, she named her son John, and Sheila called her baby Kenneth. Of course, this was back when mothers were allowed extended stays in the hospital, and for the first few days, everything was wonderful. In fact, everything was great for the first 2 weeks. The fathers, that's bank messenger John Bowers and car mechanic Alfred Reed, they visited often as their wives bonded and nursed with their newborns. Then, during the evening prior to Sheila's discharge, a nursing sister noticed that the names on each of the baby's wristbands, they didn't match the names of their corresponding mother's cots. Yes, you heard that right. Somehow Vera Bowers and Sheila Reed, they had each other's baby. The next day, a doctor made the decision to switch the babies. So the nurses placed the correct babies into the arms of their real mothers at feeding time, but both mothers reacted the same way. Both were certain that the baby they had already bonded with for the previous 2 weeks was their real baby, not the ones that they had just been handed. So could it be that motherly instinct was correct and that the name tags themselves were wrong? Well, no one could say with any certainty, so each mother left the hospital with their original babies. It wouldn't be until the infants were 5 weeks old, this is after the results of 4 separate sets of blood tests were returned, that they had a definitive answer. Are you ready? Both mothers had been nursing the wrong baby. The hospital did take steps to make sure this never happened again, and they issued a statement that, quote, blood test results show conclusively that neither mother and father could possibly be the parents of the child in their care, but could be the parents of the other child, unquote. Well, it was clear that an exchange needed to be made, but the mothers, they were reluctant to do so. So to hash this problem out, the two couples checked into a local country club, and it took 3 days to convince the women to switch babies, but they only agreed to do so for a 24-hour trial period. In the end, they did agree to switch babies permanently. Not only that, but they also had to switch the names. Young Kenneth Reed became John Bowers, and vice versa. While the two women vowed to become lifelong friends, it really didn't work out that way. And that's because over time, the two families, they simply drifted apart. While Vera and John Bowers remained married, Sheila and Alfred Reed, they divorced. So she moved with her son Kenneth back to her native Carlisle, and there Sheila remarried and raised additional children with her new husband. A reunion between the two mothers and their swapped sons took place 30 years later. That's in 1984. By this point, both were grown men and they both had families of their own. 54-year-old Sheila told a reporter,
"You cannot imagine what it was like. We'd been breastfeeding those babies, and then to be told they weren't ours. Oh, it was terrible, wasn't it, Vera?"
To which 53-year-old Vera replied,
"I'm just glad you were the other mother."
Speaking of births, a few weeks ago I came across data that determined which day of the year had the most births. And I guess two things should be noted. First, the data was limited to the United States only and would probably differ if it was done worldwide. And second, the data was only collected between the years 1994 through 2014, which isn't a 20-year span, that's actually 21 years. And if you had examined that over, say, 50 years or a century, again, the results could vary. Anyway, my question is quite simple. On what day of the year are the most children born in the United States? There's one single date where more children are born than any other day of the year. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be able to come up with the exact day. So just see if you can narrow it down to a 2-week range. For example, the first half of March or the second half of June or the second half of October. You get the idea. Anyway, hang around for a bit and I'll let you know the answer at the end of this podcast.
Oh, that's great, Bunny, and that gives us a very accurate idea of why you're called the greatest living trumpeter today. I should think you'd burn your lips right up, but you seem to thrive. How about it?
Well, I'm not missing any meals these days.
Nice talk. I suppose that's a hint that refreshments are in order.
That's no hint. That's a suggestion.
Now, what's the idea of bringing that up?
This is a model kitchen, isn't it?
It certainly is. It's the Norge model kitchen.
That's what I thought. What are we waiting for?
Quiet down there, Bunny. This is a serious meeting. All these ladies have come here to get some practical household hints.
Well, what could be more practical than my hint?
Well, not that kind of hint, Bunny. Now, you just creep back into the woodwork for a few minutes while I bring on our talented and delightful guest star. You've seen her in the pictures. You've heard her on the air. And I'm sure that you'll remember her well, Miss Frances Faye. Step up here, Frances.
I'm right here.
Are you ready to swing into action?
I'm as ready for work as a Norge washer.
And that means ready and waiting. But don't forget, Norge makes work seem like play.
That's what I'm aiming to do right now, if somebody will lend me a piano.
A piano? Why, here's 5 of them.
5 pianos? What's the idea of that?
Well, you see, we've been told that when you go to work on a piano, you're so energetic that few pianos can stand the strain. So, of course, we're taking no chances.
Okay, line them up and see what happens.
That commercial for Norge Appliances is from a 1937 broadcast of the Norge radio show. The exact date of the recording is unknown, just that it's from 1937. The show consisted of popular bands and singers doing their thing, with spots, of course, for Norge Appliances between each of the songs. This particular episode included jazz trumpeter Bunny Berrigan and his orchestra, who you heard speaking in that spot. Unfortunately, Bunny Berrigan was a heavy drinker, and the more he drank, the less successful he became, and that led to a series of financial misfortunes. As a result of his drinking, he developed cirrhosis of the liver, but he refused to reduce his consumption of alcohol or his time on the road with his band. That led to his untimely death in 1942 at the young age of 33. Wow. You also heard from singer and pianist Frances Faye, who was a second cousin to Danny Kaye. I should point out that Faye and Kaye were not their real last names. She was famous for her bawdy act, which included many double entendre songs which reflected her bisexuality without ever truly acknowledging it publicly. Frances Faye passed away on November 8, 1991, at the age of 79. As for the appliance company, Norge began its life as the Detroit Gear and Machine Company, and they made transmissions for the newly invented automobile. But after being bought out in 1925, the company changed its name to Norge and focused on manufacturing electric refrigerators. What made the company unique was that their fridges featured their patented rollator rotary compressors, and they were much quieter than the traditional compressors that were being used at the time. And of course, no one wants a noisy refrigerator in their home, so they became one of the industry's dominant manufacturers. And everything was good for the company until the Great Depression hit. Then the sale of home appliances for all companies, they just fell off a cliff, and Norge was acquired by the Borg-Warner Corporation. And it was under Borg-Warner's management that Norge would diversify into stoves, washing machines, dryers, and other home appliances. But eventually Borg-Warner sold off their Norge division in 1968 to Fetters Corporation, which today is the largest U.S. manufacturer of air conditioners. Magic Chef then acquired Norge in 1979, then they sold it to Maytag in 1986. Maytag then marketed the Norge line as entry-level, affordable appliances, but over time the brand, it just began to fade. The final straw came in 2006. That's when Whirlpool acquired Maytag and they decided to phase out the Norge brand. Now we're up to the portion of the podcast where I present 5 short stories. And today I've selected one story from each decade from the 1920s through the 1960s. As I've said many times before on the podcast, these require no further research on my part, so I'm just going to read them word for word just as they appeared in print many years ago. And I came across the first story on the front page of the Riverside Daily Press. This was published on June 3rd of 1929. The headline reads, Box brings youth to crash gates. The subheading is, Charles Loeb rides in packing case from Chicago to Los Angeles, comes out ready for location. Hollywood, June 3rd, United Press. Those who want to crash the gates of Hollywood's motion picture studios might try Charles Loeb's method of making a trip from Chicago to Los Angeles in an express car, nailed up in a wooden box and labeled, Statue, handled with care, value $500. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $9,700 today. Loeb, 28-year-old German youth, survived such a jaunt, and while he's in the Culver City jail today, he is apparently going to get his long-sought chance in the films when he gets out. Loeb's mistake came when he thought he had made the whole trip and was in the Path studio and shouted, "Hey, you out there," to attract attention. When the box was opened, he discovered he was still in an express room at Culver City. When the box was opened, out fell Loeb, clothed for business. He wore a stiff collar, checkered trousers, soft-soled dancing shoes, a derby hat, a flowing tie, and his cheeks were rouged and his eyes painted. He was ready for the show, but found a policeman. His crate had all the comforts of a home. There was a mirror at the head of the box and a makeup case. So did he make it in Hollywood? I checked the Internet Movie Database, and he did not. Next up, we have a story that was printed on page 7 of the Hanford Sentinel, that's Hanford, California, on February 16th of 1938. The headline reads, Trailer Their Home, Los Angeles, February 16th, United Press. Not in the least abashed was the Tannehill family when their home, an auto trailer, was attached for a $125 bill. Roughly, that's $3,000 today. Mr. and Mrs. Harry Tannehill and the 2 children rode along when the trailer was hauled off to a storage garage. They're going right on living in the trailer inside the garage, and the bill hasn't been paid. The 1940 story that I've selected for you is from the September 9th, 1949 edition of the Akron Beacon Journal. This appeared on the front page. Shoeshine boy gone a week, buys present. Baltimore, Associated Press. Flush with the success of his week-long business venture, 9-year-old Mike Pierce is getting set to go to work in earnest with a newly painted shoeshine box. Mike disappeared from his home a week ago. When he showed up Thursday, he had a pocket full of silver and a present for his mother, a $2.75 camera, which is roughly $38.50 today. It seems Mike's mother had been talking all summer about wanting a really good camera, so he decided to do something about it. He went out to the municipal airport and with the backing of some airline clerks, set himself up in business shining shoes. The money came rolling in. Mike blew himself in some comic books and ice cream. He made $1 the first day and decided to sleep in a truck at the airport, which is about 2 miles or 3.2 kilometers from home, until he accumulated enough money to surprise his mother with the camera. Well, with outlays for such necessary items as more comic books and more ice cream, it was a week before he could buy the camera. When a policeman finally escorted Mike back home to his worried mother, she broke into tears. That was something the businessman Mike couldn't understand. She had her camera, didn't she? Story number 4 is also from the Akron Beacon Journal. This appeared on page 2 of the August 29th, 1955 edition. The headline reads, Lightning Rams Nail into Tooth, Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, United Press. Workman Heber Hobday said he was holding a nail in his mouth when a bolt of lightning struck the back porch of a home where he was working, and it cost him a tooth. He said the bolt banged the nail into his tooth, breaking the tooth. He was not otherwise injured. And finally, we have a story that appeared on page 18 of the Marion Star, that's Marion, Ohio, on July 5th of 1967. The headline on this one reads, Mistakes Field Lights, TWA pilot lands at OSU's airport, Columbus, Ohio, Associated Press. An investigation was reported underway today in what appeared to be a goof of a TWA pilot of a Boeing 707 jetliner, which landed at Ohio State University's Don Scott Field early Tuesday instead of its destination, Port Columbus. While the investigation is underway, the pilot has been grounded. While the pilot, Captain Howard Chittenden, 43, set the big plane down safely on the 4,400-foot runway at Don Scott with room to spare, it caused some inconvenience to 49 passengers left 10 miles or 16 kilometers northwest of their destination. Taxicabs were called into service to switch the passengers to Port Columbus, but the pilot had to wait until daylight Tuesday to transfer his plane to the big airport, which is on a similar east-west line with Don Scott Field. Passengers on the misdirected flight did not know the incident until after landing. A TWA spokesman reported that the pilot had been flying on instrument flight rules, but switched to visual flight rules upon nearing Columbus and mistook the lights at Don Scott Field for those of Port Columbus after getting in below the overcast. Airport officials said he had wisely decided not to abort the landing after committing himself on his approach to Don Scott. So early in the podcast, I had asked on which day on average does the United States have the most births. And what I'll do is I'll place a link to the source of the data in the show notes if you want to check it out. I thought what I'd do is start in reverse with the 5 least popular dates. Coming in at number 5 is January 2nd with 9,307 births on average. At 4 is July 4th, which is Independence Day here in the U.S. 3 is December 24th, which is, of course, Christmas Eve. Number 2 is January 1st, which, of course, is New Year's Day. And finally, the least popular day for people to have children here in the United States is Christmas Day, December 25th. There's only 6,574 births on Christmas Day, compared to 9,307 births on January 2nd, the fifth least popular day. Now, the main reason why there are fewer births around the holidays is not that women can control the timing of their labor. They can take steps to minimize it from occurring, but nature is nature. It's just that there are fewer scheduled deliveries on the holidays. Okay, so those are the least popular days. Let's look at the 5 most common days for a baby to be born. Coming in at number 5 is September 10th with 12,143 births. Number 4 is September 17th. 3 is September 12th. 2 is September 19th. And the most popular day for anyone to have a child here in the United States is September 9th with 12,301 births. Now compare that 12,301 with the 6,574 births on average on Christmas Day. That's a really big difference. Did you notice that all of the top 5 days to give birth were in September? In fact, if you look at the top 10, all but one occur in September. So why September? Well, it's very simple. That's 9 months after the winter holidays, Christmas and New Year's, and that's when most of the conceptions take place. As for the one date in the top 10 that wasn't in September, that is July 7th. It ranks as number 6 with 12,108 births. Of course, the reason for that is that the doctors are on vacation for the Independence Day holiday here, and once they reopen, the women want to schedule right away to have their babies. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to the stories that I selected today. Since I posted the last episode, I did have the opportunity to make a brief appearance on our local NBC affiliate here in Albany, New York. I think it went fairly well, and if you'd like to put a face to the voice that you're hearing, what I'll do is I'll place a link to the video clip in the show notes for this episode. It's short, it probably runs around 3.5 minutes or so. I haven't mentioned this in a while, but the other voices you heard in this episode, they are AI generated. Basically, I record them in my voice and then I use 11 Labs to alter them to a new voice. But I should also point out that's the other voices, not me. The bulk of this episode was me speaking, and that's the real me. Anyway, the Useless Information Podcast is proud to be part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network, so visit airwavemedia.com to explore their ever-growing collection of some of the very best podcasts out there. So take care, thanks for listening, and I hope you'll tune in the next time. Bye.